You never quite know how your day's going to turn out on the water, just like the crew on board the motor yacht Loon found out several weeks back when they all boarded the HCB tender for the yacht, decided to go out and enjoy a day of boating, when all of a sudden the vessel wound up crashed on the rocks with 11 people on board. There were a few injuries, but fortunately no life-threatening injuries, but what's really surprising about this is this happened around Christmas time and the boat's just now getting pulled off the rocks. Just wild to think about that you would leave a boat like this up on the rocks that long, but just one of the wild things we'll see in this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. Our first story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to Indonesia in the city of Samarinda, which is the capital city of the Indonesian province East Kalimantan, which lies on the island of Borneo and right on the banks of the Mahakam River, which is what we see here in these images. What we're witnessing is a coal barge that was traversing the river being pulled by a tug vessel when all of a sudden, in heavy wind and rains, as we can see here, the coal barge actually broke the line that was connected to the tug vessel and wound up drifting free and crashing into a cafe that was located on the banks of the river. Here we can see the aftermath from the damage to the cafe after the vessel winds up coming to a stop. The incident sent patrons and workers alike running for their lives from the cafe just before the collision occurred. As we can see from the images here, the damage to the cafe itself is pretty substantial, which is to be expected from such a large vessel colliding into the building. Fortunately, this did happen at a very slow speed since it was just being pushed by the wind toward the riverbank, meaning that everybody was able to successfully get out of the cafe without injury, but it's probably going to take quite some time for the owners of this to go ahead and get this one pieced back together and get the cafe reopened. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to California, where this was the scene just a few days ago when the Coast Guard wound up interdicting a panga with approximately 14 people on board around 20 miles off the coast of Point Loma. The incident unfolded when Customs and Border Protection notified Coast Guard personnel that a panga-style vessel was traveling north toward the maritime boundary line. The Coast Guard cutter Terrell Horn was diverted to the scene, and the cutter wound up launching a boarding team with the assistance of CBP and interdicting the vessel as we see in the images here. The boarding teams discovered 14 individuals on board the vessel. Initial interviews revealed that all the individuals claimed to be of Mexican nationality.
Which one is it? 12, 13 o 14? 14? ¿Tienes niños? ¿Qué es su nacionalidad? ¿Todos son mexicanos? ¿Tienes niños?
The individuals on the vessel were eventually detained and put on board the Coast Guard cutter and brought back to shore, where they were transferred over to local Customs and Border Patrol, who will begin the process of sending this crew back to Mexico. At this time, there's been no further information on exactly what the crew was doing, if they were out there trying to illegally fish, which is highly unlikely with this many people on the boat, or if this was an attempt to actually try and smuggle these 14 people into the United States, or if they were out there looking for something else on the water. But at this time, all 14 people are expected to be extradited back to their home country of Mexico. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us up to the northeast and off the coast of Rhode Island, where this was the scene just a little over a week ago when the Coast Guard wound up rescuing 4 people from a fishing boat that wound up colliding with another fishing vessel approximately 10 miles south of Block Island. The Coast Guard Sector Long Island received a distress call from 2 fishing vessels claiming they had collided out on the water. Coast Guard Station Montauk wound up launching a 47-foot lifeboat to the scene, and Coast Guard Air Station Cape Cod sent a Jayhawk helicopter to assist. The 2 vessels in question are the 87-foot Scalloper Vanquish, which was reported to have 6 people on board, and also reported no damage during the incident. However, the other vessel involved, the 55-foot trawler Matty Marin II, reported 4 people on board and damage causing flooding in the engine room that they were unable to keep up with. Fortunately, the Coast Guard quickly arrived to the scene, and the 4 crew members on board the vessel were able to vacate and go on board the Coast Guard rescue ship. The Coast Guard did try to use dewatering pups to keep the vessel afloat, but to no success, and unfortunately the vessel had to be abandoned, but no injuries were reported. Thanks for watching, crew. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. If you ever see anything crazy happening out in your waterways, be sure to hit us up on Facebook or Instagram and let us know when you might see your stories over here. And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and drop an anchor on the subscribe button. If not, we're coming to steal your drain plug.